on YouTube. This will be out on the Clausen YouTube channel. That looks good. All indications are green. The meeting is yours, Mr. Chair. Let me know if you need anything.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Okay. So at this time, I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. Time now, 7:31. At this time, if you would all please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, at this time, let's see, Nick, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Georges? Present, attending from Clausen, Michigan, Oakland County, United States of America.
Mr. Kucera?
Here in Clausen, Michigan.
Mr. McHale? Mr. Nushai?
Present from Troy in Michigan.
Mr. Pernick?
Present from here in Clausen, Oakland County, Michigan.
Ms. Redmond?
Here, Clausen, Oakland County, Michigan.
Mr. Sinaki?
Present, Clausen, Oakland County, and Michigan.
Mr. Shepard?
Here, Clausen, Michigan, Oakland County.
Mr. Watson?
Here, Clausen, Michigan. Clausen, Michigan.
There's a quorum.
All right, thank you. Next, if we have approval of the regular meeting minutes from April 27th, 2021. I would like to make a correction to the minutes that Ms. Hodges' name be replaced and Ms. Redmond's name be entered as being present at the last regularly held Planning Commission meeting.
I'll make a motion that we approve the regular minute meetings from April 27, 2021 with the changes that you made there.
Okay.
Support.
Motion support. Further discussion? Seeing none. Roll call, please.
Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Mr. Pernick?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Sinaki?
Yes.
Mr. Shepard?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
And Mr. Georges?
Yes.
And Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
Okay. Next on the agenda is public discussion, items that are not on the agenda. Does anyone have anything that they wish to discuss from the board? And then we will reach out to the public for any items that are not on the agenda.
I will let the board go first if there's anyone that would like to make comment, and then we'll see if there's anyone from the public.
Hello.
There we go.
Hello.
Hello,
Testing,
caller.
testing.
Yes, caller, we can hear you. What was your name?
This was Jim McHale. I seconded Greg's motion. I didn't know if it came through or not, trying to get through on the phone.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Mr. Chair, at this point, I don't see any people from the public at this point.
Yeah, sounds good. I just have one question. There's a new business that's gone into the alteration shop downtown. They have what appears to be a temporary sign above their business. Is that a permanent sign or is that? It's a sports card shop?
It's news to me.
I haven't seen a sign permit yet, Glenn.
When someone told me there was a sports car shop going
Oh,
on.
no,
but
I'm sorry. Yeah, Luton's
Yeah.
car. Yes, they do have a sign permit and they are all set. They have a CFO. They opened on Saturday.
Okay. Okay. And that's all that I had. All right. So any other items not on the agenda? All right, going once, going twice. Okay, we will close the public discussion for items not on the agenda. All right, next, we'll go forward with item number 6, public hearing on landscaping amendments. Joe, you want to talk about that?
Right.
Or do I need to wait? Hold on a second. Sorry, talk about it first, then open public hearing, and then move on from there, right?
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, we've been talking about landscaping for a while here. Basically, we had some scattered standards and some that were a little out of date. And the idea was that we wanted to get everything, getting a little bit of feedback from somebody, I don't know who. Possibly just mute, and that might take care of it. So yeah, we wanted to get everything kind of consolidated in one section and update things, modernize, and work a little bit more towards some of our goals like species diversity and just in general improving the aesthetic character of properties in the city when new development occurs. So what that led us to was a new section or an amended section of the ordinance that has all the standards in it. And we also have a couple of other, if you're looking at the amending ordinance, I'm hearing some other conversation. If you're looking at the amending ordinance that's in front of you, you'll see that there are a few different sections that are affected. One is definitions. We added a couple of definitions. The next one is site plan approval. We clarified and improved the standards for what needs to be included on a landscape plan during site plan approval. And then there's the actual landscaping standard. So that's the largest part of the document. And once you get past that to page, I want to say 8. I don't know if it's 9 of the amending ordinance. You note there are 3 items there that just delete something. That's the BRD1 district, the BRD2 district, and the Westgate district, which all had their own little standards that were almost identical in 3 different places. All of that stuff is covered in this section now. So we don't need those anymore. So those sections can go away. In addition to these standards, we have the guidelines document, which is referred to multiple times in the ordinance. That is a complement to the standards that we're adopting, and it basically people, what their planting details are supposed to be, and a few other things about care and species selection. And some kind of I don't want to call them frequently asked questions, but it's something similar to that. It's, just guidance for how you prepare a landscape plan. And that's it. That sums it up. If there's any discussion or questions or anything, I'm happy to go through them.
No, I just want to commend you on putting that all together. It looks fantastic. So I really appreciate it. And it's been a long time in the wishing to have happen. So that was one of the things when I first came on board that I would like to have seen updated. And I'm extremely happy that we've got to this point. So,
Glad to hear it.
Mr. Tangery, if I could offer a suggestion, if you'd like to suspend screen sharing,
Mhm.
everyone might be able to see each other a little bit more during this period. Thank you.
Not a problem.
And certainly bring it back up when it's appropriate.
Mhm.
okay, so at this time, I will open the public hearing on this ordinance. So if there is anyone from the public who wishes to speak, now is the time to do that.
Yes, if there's anyone from the public that would like to speak on this topic, please raise your virtual hand. You can find your virtual hand by clicking on participants on the bottom of your screen and then looking over to the usually the right, and there will be an option to raise your virtual hand in the dialog box. Again, if you would like to speak on this topic, we just ask that you raise your virtual hand. I'll give it just a moment here. Not seeing any hands raised at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so give one last opportunity and then we'll bring it to the Planning Commission for any questions, any points you wish to raise, and then after that we will close public hearing. So as far as the public, going once, going twice. All right, now moving on to anyone from the board wishing to raise any questions, concerns, or thoughts regarding that. All right.
Yes, Glenn, Jim McHale.
Yes. Hey, Jim, there you go.
Yeah, I was on, for the record, I did tune in at 7:33. Just trying to get the phone. I'm on the phone, Oakland County, Clawson, Michigan.
Yep.
On sheet 10 of that proposal, we are going to amend that to the new mayor, correct?
Oh, yeah, we'll have to, yeah. Yeah, that I'll making a note to change that. Change note to new. This was created before I knew we had one, so.
Well, I know Reese was previous when we did accomplish this to begin with, and then now Paula Milan.
Yep. Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
It didn't even occur to me, so.
Hey, hey, we're all in this together.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. All right. Anyone else wishing to bring in any subject matter regarding this? David.
It's not really a subject matter a question. And I understand there might be cost and logistics associated with it, but are the guidelines like the ones that have been produced here, the color guidelines, are they, or do we provide these in a printed form to the public? I mean, it's great that it's all available on our website. I just didn't know, for folks who might find it more useful to have a paper version of it and not have access or easy access.
Yeah, the intention is that it gets distributed with the application for site approval. And if someone gets a printed one, they'd get a printed version of this. And if somebody were to download it, they just get the PDF version like you do.
Okay, terrific.
Yeah, because it's designed to match the development review guide that we've got that has all the applications in it, so it can just be attached right to it.
Excellent. All right, anyone else? Okay, so seeing no further questions, concerns, or additional comments, I will close public hearing now. All right, so at this time we have closed public hearing. We need to move this on to City Council for their review and potential approval. So we will need a motion and support in order to do that.
I don't have it in front of me, but I'll give you a motion to pass this along to mayor and council.
I'll support that.
Okay, so just making sure, this being the ordinance to amend the City of Clausen Code of Ordinances, Chapter 34, Article 10, Division 1, Section 34-4, 81, Division 4, and so on, to update landscaping regulations.
Yes.
That's one.
Perfect, excellent, okay. All right, Nick, roll call, please. Or, I'm sorry, pardon me. Any further discussion regarding this? Seeing none, Nick, roll call, please.
Mr. Pernick,
Yes.
Miss Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Sinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
yes,
Mr. Georges,
Yes.
Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
Mr. McHale,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai.
Yeah.
Motion carries.
Okay, excellent. All right, with that, we move on to item number 7, which I think we will, the applicant, Joe, if you wanted to explain item 7.
Right, so the applicant's been made aware that he needs to provide some more materials per the discussion we had at the last meeting. And he has therefore requested to be tabled at this time. I am going to say that you could table to a date uncertain because we don't know exactly when he's going to get the materials in. And as soon as he gets the materials in, we will incorporate that into our review and we'll put him on an agenda.
So does the applicant know that when they do come in front of us, we will have a strict adherence to a timeline on which they will finish their project?
That has been explained in the past, yes.
Okay. Okay. So, does anyone have a motion to table agenda item 7, consideration of site plan approval for 655 South Main, which is also known as the Church of Clausen, to a date to be defined?
If that's your motion, I'll support it.
Okay, I guess. Fine, that's fair enough. If my motion and we've got support, perfect. All right.
Yeah, I like the verbiage.
Thanks.
One problem I have is that the site plan review that was provided in our packet is dated November 27th of 2018. I'd like to see that date change. I'd like to see them come up with some new information. I think we've been at this thing for 4 or 5 years now. I think that they should be updating a lot of it. There's a lot of changes that need to be made. And I think they could be made behind the scenes before they come back for their proper site plan to us. I'm not sure about tabling. If that just puts them off till whenever, we're not going to set a date.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I really don't know when they're going to be able to get.
Well,
the
the next
stuff to
thing
us.
that we can do, if we, by doing this, and okay, so we have a ability, we can still do show cause, can we not?
Correct.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a reasonable amount of time, and then there's a reasonable amount of time. I think as far as if they were sincere as far as getting their paperwork together and what they required, they will have their due diligence, and I think we should be able to review this again at our next meeting as far as where they are in that status. So is that something we could update at our next meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as,
Okay.
yeah, we'll make sure we get you some information on what's expected.
Okay.
And
Now I still have a
it will
motion,
be
but
soon.
I want to, this is, how should I say this? Officially unofficial, but that there could possibly be a show cause if we do not hear any positive movement on this site plan. But that's just a discussion point, not part of this motion.
Just a point of order on that too,
Sure.
Glenn. With regard to what Greg mentioned on the date of the drawing, now if there's revisions, that can be reflected in an update, just like they do in the industry no matter what. anytime there's a revision, it should be dated. In other words, you've got a
Yes, that's
release
right.
date and an update. So
I
that could
agree.
reflect and answer Greg's question on that too.
Okay.
But the paperwork that they're presenting to us is dated 2018. And also the paperwork that was given to our engineering department, I think 3 cases of that, it was said that was also put out in 2018. So that they're throwing 3-year-old paperwork at us. I'd like to see that.
Right, and that's unacceptable. They should have an amendment on that with a new release date
Correct.
to bring it up to date.
I agree with that. Ed?
So then, based upon the assessments that have done by city engineering and the comments based on this board, should we table it with a official memo from the city with our pre-assessment just based upon requirements, documentation requirements that we see deficient, so that when they do come back, it's not undocumented hodgepodge?
I think
So-
as far as referring to administration to handle that, I think that, I think let them do that. I don't necessarily think we need to include that in the motion. Obviously, discussing it here is part of that process, but as far as the actual putting it in front of the applicant, I would say just defer to administration to perform that.
I would
So would you
tend
consider
to
adding a
agree.
Hold on a
sentence?
second, Jim, hold on, wait a second. Ed, go
Would
ahead.
you consider
Okay.
adding a sentence to the motion that says that the board instructs the city administration to provide these documentation comments?
Sure, I'll add that. I'll accept that as addition to my amendment, or not to my motion, so we don't need to amend it. So that, if we could add that to my motion, Nick, that'd be great.
And I'll support the change.
Okay,
It will note
Right,
that
and
the
that's
letters
what I
have
was
been
going
provided.
to agree on. Yeah,
all right, so we have motion.
yeah, we should
support.
make, so we should have some guideline comment there, yes.
All right, motion support. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. Nick, roll call, please.
Mr. Sanaki,
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Georges,
Yes.
Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
Mr. McHale,
Yes,
Mr. Nushai,
Yes.
Mr. Pernick,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on, agenda item number 8, other business, 8A, building facade materials outside the downtown. Joe, if you'd like to discuss that.
Yep, I don't have any visuals with this one, so we can just kind of focus on the memo. So I'm on the wrong page of my document. Hang on. Okay, so this is a conversation we actually started a couple months ago, but obviously a lot found its way onto our agendas in the last couple of months, so we have left the conversation for the moment. Basically, what we have a prohibition on a material called EFIS in the CC and CMD districts, and then we also have some standards in the Westgate and BRD1 districts that keep it from being used within 10 feet of the ground, basically, on a building facade. And if you're not aware of what EFIS is, it stands for, it's EIFS. It stands for Exterior Insulation Finishing System. A lot of people refer to it as stucco or false stucco because it's generally what it sort of looks like. And it's basically a panel that's mounted on a facade, and it's used in a lot of kind of modern buildings. However, it generally does have some issues with durability, and those issues are most prominent when it's in an area that people can access, which would be at the ground level, right? So if you have a bunch of boxes on a hand truck and you run into it, it tends to punch a hole in it. And if you have people just kind of, say it's on a route to a school and school kids are walking by every day and dragging their hand on it, it picks up the grit and the color from that pretty quickly. So a lot of communities have moved toward not permitting this material at the ground floor. They still permit it generally as an accent material or above the ground floor. Some communities do cite aesthetic concerns with it. I think if it's used poorly, it generally does not look that good. It can be used well though. So my concern is more about durability. And that's the reason that we have the restrictions on it that we do in the CC and CMD districts. I wasn't here when the Westgate BRD1 and BRD1 districts were developed, but I assume that's a similar concern at work there. So to kind of return to where we left it last time, we had a little bit of draft language that's on page 2 of the memo in your packet. And it just basically talks about, it's kind of a section that basically just addresses buildings, and it doesn't get into a ton of detail. It's talking about building a building with durable exterior materials, and then it's specifying that EFIS isn't used within 10 feet of finished grade at the base of a building. And if you want to have a cornice or something that is topped with it, you're probably in good shape because that's probably going to be more than 10 feet off the ground. But the columns, under your awning or something, they're not going to be wrapped in EFIS because they'll get beat up in a matter of years. So I mean, I guess your thoughts are welcome, and if you're good with the language down below, I'll make a note of that. If you're thinking that you want to go further or something, that's fine too. We can talk about that.
Yeah, I don't like EFIS, and I don't think it has a place as far as building materials for the most part as a general covering on walls. It reminds me of Elpo primer on cars back in the 80s and 90s. And what would happen is that the Elpo primer, as it would be exposed to UV light, would cause the paint to flake off all over the place. So while it was efficient and inexpensive, it also wasn't durable and looked awful. And I think EFIS is similar to that. But those are my thoughts. Greg,
why are we stating that it's okay outside of the CC and the CMD districts? Why are we limiting districts in this thing? Why shouldn't this be strictly a citywide thing? Are you assuming that there's more foot traffic in the heart of downtown and the city center, less people bumping into the buildings there than they are downtown? I would think if we don't like the building material, why do we allow it in the city, any place in the city?
Well, I mean, it's already not permitted in the CC and CMD districts. Let's see, the language is in the memo, which is here.
Do you want me to read it off? I'll read it off.
Yeah, sure.
So 34-1058, building materials for non-residential buildings outside the CC and CMD districts. All non-residential buildings located outside of the CC and CMD district shall meet the following standards for exterior materials and maintenance. 1, all building exteriors shall be maintained in good order at all times. 2, building exteriors shall be comprised of durable materials. 3, exterior insulation finishing systems, also known as EIFS or EFIS, shall not be used as a building material within 10 feet of finished grade at the base of the building. So yeah, so we're trying to limit its scope to only 10 feet, and that would be in the way it's written. You're saying it's in all non-residential areas.
Yeah, and it's outright prohibited in the CC and CMD districts. There is some of it down there because some of it was used before the prohibition went into effect. Whereas outside of those districts, we're basically saying it can be used above 10 feet above, grade, because it is very commonly used as an accent material, mostly because of the way it can be molded. And if it's up and away from where people can get to it, it doesn't fall apart the same way that it does down at the ground level.
It's basically styrofoam is what it is. And then they coat it in some durable material, but it's just, yeah. Anyway, David.
Very quickly, and this may be defined elsewhere in our ordinances, just definitionally durable. Just because fiberglass is durable, plastic is durable, certain other materials are durable. I mean, I understand the idea. I just wondered if, that could be amped up a bit.
Sure. Yeah, that's certainly a valid discussion point because, I left it kind of intentionally open-ended so that we could discuss it.
Sure.
But a lot of ordinances do have a list of examples, brick, stone, metal, kind of whatever the list happens to be that you were interested in, is a pretty common provision in an ordinance.
Okay.
So you're kind of steering people in a direction, but you generally have a clause in there that leaves it open to approve other materials if they seem appropriate.
Okay.
You could say durable materials such as brick, stone, metal, and then or other materials as approved by the planning commission at the time of site plan approval.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't want to start a slippery slope and say things like, well, polycarbonate materials are fine, but
yeah, they may be cost prohibitive, but yeah.
So
yeah, only titanium on outside walls, right?
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, because I mean, there are communities that use this type of provision to be prescriptive, where they say it has to be one of these three materials. And I don't think we want to be in that place necessarily, because you never know. Somebody might come in with something really cool with a material we weren't expecting. They could have some sort of composite wood material that looks awesome, and we'd be stuck and we couldn't approve it. So that's why you always want that or other materials as permitted by the planning commission at the time of site plan approval in there, so that you can have that flexibility you're suggesting. But if someone's got a good idea, otherwise, you want to be able to approve it.
Okay. Thank you.
And you had something?
Yes. And maybe it's just semantics and numbering systems, but I would make item 3 a clarifying subset of number 2, and say that at this time, this EFIS has not been demonstrated as a durable material, and therefore shall not be used within 10 feet of the finished grade to the base of the building. And with that, in the previous discussion, there was some mentions of, except for maybe decorations, but maybe at this point in time, shall not is the is the right thing to do and let them decorate with something else. And during the site plan review, then you can discuss whether or not any of this type of material used above grade has a high propensity for not being durable, like it's being brushed by trees or it's got a direct water splash pattern from something else, because you could have some kind of a roof pattern that splashed one thing down on the other, and this would not hold up to that water splash. But I think the qualifier is most important as an example, and therefore it leaves open to discussions for people to say, as somebody pointed out, yeah, I want to use some kind of a polymer or whatever it is, and you have to demonstrate how that would be have a durability compatibility to the other known materials.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. I like it.
I think part of our saving grace here is your item number 1, all building exteriors shall be maintained in good order at all times. I think that's something that we can fall back upon. Because with the EFIS, I'm not against EFIS. I don't mind the looks of it. It's not necessarily the problem's not necessarily in the product itself. It's also in the installation job of it.
Oh,
when
yeah.
they put the restaurant in Da Nang restaurant, the face of that has a lot of EFIS on it. And it wasn't falling apart at ground level. It was the decorative parts on the top that were falling out.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was on the installer. He removed them, put the different type of glue on or whatever it is. So it's installation is a big problem. So if something starts falling apart, pieces of the building fall off, we can go back here and say that they must be maintained.
Right. Yep. And yeah, it is important that it's installed correctly. Drainage is really important. It has to be properly drained, because if water gets behind it, that's the beginning of the end. If the water has nowhere to go once it gets behind it, that's really a death sentence for this material. And a lot of installers don't do all the necessary work. It increases the cost of installation actually quite a bit to drain it properly. So a lot of projects that are done on the cheap that use this material, it's not drained properly, and you get problems like that very quickly. You get a bad year for rain or something, and all of a sudden it's coming down.
Let's see, Jim, you have your hand raised?
That's me.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, I just had am I stepping on toes?
No, not at all. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay, no, I'm agreeing with Joe on items 1, 2, and 3 on this because, and with Greg, the item number 1 covers it, that it's got to be maintained. And by definition, EFIS is durable to a certain extent, and we limited it to above 10 feet. So it's got to be somewhat acceptable in communities because of Michigan weather anyway. Mm-hmm. So I think items 1, 2, and 3, as noted by Joe here, I think it does cover what we're looking at, especially with item number 1, that it has to be maintained in good order at all times. Mm-hmm. So I'm agreeing with what we've got so far written down on paper here.
All right, anyone else? Okay. Well, I think you've got some feedback with which you can work and fine tune that. Put some more,
that's good.
Flesh it out a little bit more.
Exactly. That's
all right.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. If there's no further discussion on that topic, we'll move on to other business. Item B, impervious coverage on residential lots.
All right. So this is an issue. It's actually come up a few times in conversation, particularly in regards to front yards. I don't know that it's been mentioned. I don't know that it's been mentioned as much in relation to rear yards. But in our R1 and R2 districts, we have a 35% lot coverage standard. And what that means is that buildings can cover up to 35% of the lot. So that's a house and a garage or whatever other building you might have on the lot, a shed or something. And we have these standards for detached single family dwelling units. And we could add a paragraph to that to deal with this impervious surface issue. And one of the reasons that this is being brought to you right now, it's not just because we had a relatively light agenda. We actually have had some inquiries recently about, you know, people asking, hey, can I just like cover my entire backyard with a patio? And while aesthetically that might be very nice for the homeowner if they did it right, there are some issues with stormwater and other things that putting a whole bunch of impervious surface on a lot can cause, particularly for the neighbors. Personal experience, I have a neighbor behind and to the left of me whose lot just sheds water onto mine when it rains. And I've got a puddle where I never used to have one before that house was built. And if you had someone next door to you who paved their entire backyard, you might suddenly start to notice there's some changes in the way water is coming onto your lot. So I do think that we should look at having some sort of standard, and I would say it makes a lot of sense to address the various yards separately. So you've got a front yard, you have a rear yard, you have side yards. And those are defined by where the principal building is. So if it's behind the principal building, it's rear yard. If it's between the principal building and the lot line, side lot lines, it's side yard. And if it's in front of the principal building, it's front yard. I threw a very loose draftee standard in here, and I threw totally generic round numbers into it, which are very large. I actually think they're pretty large. So, you know, in order to help you kind of understand what those numbers might mean, I did throw together a little visual aid here. Let me bring it up. So our smallest lot in the R1 and R2 districts, can everybody see that?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I'm on a phone.
Well, I'll describe it so you can follow along.
Picture if you
Okay,
want.
well, run me a picture and I'll pick it up from you later.
Sure thing. Yeah, no problem. I'll send it to you. So we have a 5,500 square foot lot is the minimum lot size in these districts. That's 50 by 110 because 50 is the narrowest a lot can be. And if you look at what 35% lot coverage is, this is it. You have a house and a garage. This is a 22 by 22 garage and a house with a 1,440 square foot footprint. It might be 2 stories, but it takes up that much of the lot. So when we look at this lot, we're left with a driveway area. We have some sort of uncovered porch on the front, which can project up to 10 feet into the front yard under your ordinance. And when we break it down, we look at the rear yard. Right now, with this garage and just this driveway apron, we have about 29.4% coverage, 30-ish % coverage in the rear yard. So if you wanted to let someone have patio or something else, clearly you have to be permitting more than 30% coverage of impervious surfaces in a rear yard. Because this is even kind of a small apron here to get into the driveway. So I think the number I threw into the document was 50% on a lot this size. right? Or not, I might even, I think I threw some larger numbers in the rear yard.
You said, yeah, 50% on the front yard, right?
Yeah, 50% of the front yard. And then the rear yard, on these smaller lots, I think I threw in 70%. And then I have a couple different ranges. If it's less than 6,000 square feet, we're at 70. If it's between 6,000 and 8,000, it's at 60. And if it's over 8,000, it's 50. Because, obviously, you have lots that are much deeper than 110. You have lots that are larger than the minimum lot size. So, whatever scale we wind up with, you want to make sure that on the larger lots that, 50% on a big lot is a lot of impervious coverage, right? So, I'm basically, this is kind of a framework. It's not really meant to be final language necessary, but we need something to get us thinking about it, right? So that's how that rear yard breaks down. When we look at the front yard, we have a 10 by 15 uncovered porch that extends into the front yard. And then we've got 10 by 25 driveway. And the front yard is 1,250 square feet. So we're 32% coverage there. I have 50% in this document, but something in the range of, 40% might be actually appropriate when we consider the porch and the driveway and how much of a front yard they might take up. It sounds like a lot when you start talking about it, but it's pretty much, what a lot of people have in the city. I think there are lots that are certainly at 50%. If you've got a porch that goes the full width of the house and extends out the full allowance, you're probably going to be real close to 50%.
But that's a porch with a concrete foundation, or right? Because if you have,
there are quite a few of them, yeah.
Okay. Because if you have a porch that's made of wood and you don't have, and it's not you only have footings, and you have maybe gravel or something underneath, that's not necessarily considered. You wouldn't consider that to be an impervious surface, right?
No, not generally. No.
Okay.
It depends a little bit on the compaction underneath, but no, usually we wouldn't think of that if it's just pea gravel or something.
Sure.
But yeah, a lot of people do have the kind of concrete slab or the raised concrete. That's certainly impervious surface. So, when we think about coverage in a front yard, 50% sounds like a lot, but it's kind of common, actually. And then when we think about the rear yard, it's a matter of, we want to make sure people can enjoy their rear yards, right? If they want to put a pool in or a patio or something, they need to be able to do it. And there has to be 5 feet off the lot line, just like other accessory structures. And as long as it is, they're allowed to do it at this point. So we don't want to get into a situation where we're being so restrictive that we are, encumbering people's enjoyment of their rear yards. But we also don't want to be in a situation where we have the potential for drainage problems with wall-to-wall coverage. So there's a balance to strike. And part of the reason I shot for these fairly high numbers in the rear yard in this kind of quickie draft here is that I'm trying to make considerations like, well, what if someone does want a pool or something like that? That's going to take up a lot of space. And if you keep a 5-foot buffer around the edge, that kind of automatically gives you some green space or unpaved space. And then as far as the side yards, a lot of lots in Clawson have a driveway that takes up one side yard, and the whole side yard is covered in driveway, and that's just how it is because of, we've got the garage in the back, and we have to allow people to cover one side yard, but the other one shouldn't be paved, because there's probably not much of a reason to pave it. So, I don't expect anybody to like have the answer tonight or to make a decision tonight. I could give you more examples and kind of show you, here's what this looks like when we're at 70 on this size lot. Here's what this looks like when we're at 50 on this size lot. What do we think is reasonable? But as a conversation starter.
Hey, Joe, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is there a way we can offset that with, if it's above a certain percentage, by ensuring that they have some type of drain tile or some type of drainage system that can offset that extra, land that we're seeking?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We can basically what you're doing at that point is you're setting a threshold. If you're over this percentage, this level of review kicks in essentially, where we have to verify that you've got adequate drainage or absorption, or I guess we could probably talk to the engineers about what they think would be the right standard.
Well, and I'm sure that would, obviously, if you're digging up and adding French drains, that's going to add to the cost of a project. So I'm kind of just throwing that out there as on the top of my mind. I don't know how practical that is in terms of, let's say I want a pool in my backyard, and instead of it costing $5,000, now it's going to cost, $15,000 because I have to put these drains in. So that's just kind of throwing it out there. And I don't know if you've implemented that anywhere in how that went.
I haven't implemented it in a city like this, with this size lot. I've definitely got some cities I work in that have this type of standard, but they generally are larger lot cities. And I have done a little bit of digging into some of your kind of peer community standards, and some have nothing and some have standards, so I could even provide those to you, the ones that do.
Well, that I'd be curious about those too, but I think most of our peer cities suffer the same problem of backyards flooding.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's common. Yeah. So I don't know if they're necessarily somewhere we want to look in terms of setting a standard, or it's a good guideline though, for sure. But yeah.
So it's a combination in our area as far as impervious surface and the additional concrete and other structures that are taking up green space. It's also the type of soil that we have.
Sure.
The fact that we're predominantly clay soil. Clay, just because of its nature, is relatively impervious to water absorption to begin with. So that's what's helping to cause a lot of our flooding. So in my mind, there's two things that we're trying to avoid here, right? One is the flooding situation by having those impervious surfaces, but also there's a heat island effect, that the more surface area that's covered with less green space and more concrete or asphalt or buildings, the more radiant heat will develop, and you'll have microclimates as a result of that. Which will help, it contribute to, what people may consider to be climate change. But that's just the nature of, as far as urbanization, of having those heat islands and microclimates as a result of the development. So I don't know as far as whether or not adding a tree to the ordinance would help, or saying that if you've got clay soil, how you can incorporate that and what needs to be done in order to amend the soil to accommodate additional development, whether that's a practice that's been investigated. I mean, it's
Yeah, I
really,
mean, yeah, it is a cost driver, I guess. So I think a lot of projects might stall on that, but there might be some way we can consider that. And you know, there could be some sort of provision that you know helps us achieve our goal without being too onerous.
yeah. I mean, as far as if somebody wanted to put an in-ground pool in their backyard, right? I'm hoping would not happen is that in the process of putting an in-ground pool, they then concrete over their entire backyard, right? Because that would be, I don't know, that would be detrimental to the rest of the neighbors. Not only when they decide that they need to, you know, drain their pool for whatever reason. That past experience in my parents' home, that happened with a neighbor of ours behind us. They were on the uphill slope, and whenever they drained their pool, the chlorine would tend to kill anything in our backyard.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
again, that's kind of thing that we want to be conscientious of, but I don't know how necessarily you can incorporate something like that in.
Yeah.
So.
Is there any chance that we, you know, survey the neighbors in a way that we kind of do it in a public forum? I mean, I know it sounds a little extensive, but in terms of getting an idea of whether or not there's present flooding or not, you know, obviously there's particular areas in neighborhoods that have a lower table than the rest. And is there ever a chance that you might survey, not bring them on public forum, but survey the neighbors and kind of give them time to dispute if we're going over a certain percentage, or give feedback in terms of a certain, once we reach a certain, you know, let's say 70%, that we give the opportunity for neighbors to give input on that?
I think the one mechanism that you would have available to do that would be to have some sort of trigger for a public hearing when you got to a certain level. And it would be either a special land use or some sort of zoning board of appeals process. You know, right now all the residential lot approvals are done administratively. So that would create a new process. Basically, it would be all of a sudden, if you want to go over a certain level, you'd be subject to a public hearing, and your neighbors could weigh in. That would be the one way that you could do that. Because in an administrative process, we don't really have a mechanism for that. We can't, you know, each property is its own discrete property. So, you know, and one neighbor's objection doesn't necessarily impact what we can do from an administrative standpoint. We would need to make it a special land use or something like that had a discretionary approval aspect to it. And then you'd work through the public hearing process to allow people to have input. I don't know how that sounds to everybody, but that would be the way you could do it.
That sounds, you know, as far as being a trigger from, because none of these come in front of us now, right? The only time I think anything that's come up is through for lot development is through ZBA. But and that's, Ed, you have your hand raised?
Oh, yes.
I'd like to hear from you, actually.
As our liaison.
This is a prime example of regulations that the general public couldn't understand, but they don't want. We had that when we tried to limit fences. We had that when we tried to limit garage sizes, proportion to the house. There's a whole bunch of things. I do believe, though, that under our sustainability, is that new little group that we have, that we could have a recognition in our ordinance that says that, and the bullet points I think are the green space and the water management. I thought there was a third one that I had, but for considerations like that, you could have in your ordinance that says that if you're planning for something with less than this amount of green space on your lot, that you need an engineering review to address those considerations. And you might be able to do it, or you might find out that, you know, at that point in time, the engineering review would say, well, gee whiz, you're going to do that. And all of this concrete that you have is going to run water right in your neighbor's backyard because that's the way the slope is. So there is a consideration, but the thing about the 50% and no driveway on this side, no driveway on that side, the line at the zoning board of appeals will be along again for the same thing. And especially when it came to the backyard.
Sure. Yep.
It was very difficult for the citizens that were volunteers on the zoning board of appeals to say, gee whiz, you can't do that. But then they go, well, this is in my backyard and I value a swimming pool for my kids much more than I do a little place of green space, because they can't do anything back there. If they want green space, they go to the park. So just consideration, but the idea here that our ordinance ought to address impervious services and water management and Mr. Shepherd did that, the
heat island.
Heat island. Thank you very much. Those are
The
the 3
microclimate
points.
mitigation. Yep.
So those kind of things, you know, if you have some guidelines, and then especially if a developer comes in with greens, with, you know, maybe I've got one of these new houses that's going to be an infill, and I'm loaded with a buku bucket of cash, and I say, oh, by the way, when you're building me my house, I want my $25,000 in-ground pool and deck, and gee whiz, it's going to go right there between the house and the garage in my backyard. And from a homeowner's perspective, that's might be what they want to look at and use. But you have to consider what that does to the heat island and the water management scenarios. But I think you're too detailed in the can and cannot do's right now. I would not be in favor of recommending it at that level of detail.
So I think maybe a better way to do it, rather than have a cap, is to say that there's a threshold over which you need engineering review to ensure that you're not going to be creating detrimental runoff effects on your neighbor's property, at least as far as the backyard is concerned. That seems to be something that it's not a standard that's going to send them to the ZBA or something. But it is something that gives us the power to check, just to make sure that they're not going to be wreaking havoc on their surroundings.
But what if the engineering comes back and says, yeah, this is recommended that you don't do that?
Well, then their remedy at that point is to design it so that it's not a problem. So they've got to figure something out that will meet the engineering standards for runoff.
Well, I mean, as far as what
I disagree.
Go ahead, Jim.
I don't mean to interject, but this is for Joe and Aaron and Mr. Sanaki. You can start by looking at the areas of Knollwood, Elmsford, and Elmwood, first blocks off Main Street. Our runoff and our water covers from Washington. It runs down about 10 houses in the backyard that flood. And some of the flooding on the north side of Elmsford comes up to the person's deck to the house. Now, and I love Joe's comment about a 10-foot driveway. I wish I had one. Most of them here are little over 8 feet, 9 feet.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, and the lots are not 50. So there is a lot of variables within our city as it is. And from a devil's advocate point, what if I took patio blocks and I made a 20 by 30 patio in my backyard and then put an awning up? And I made sure that my grade went towards the back. Now, I've also put a new shed in my backyard, but I raised it up 18 inches due to the fact of the poor drainage that we have existing. Because people build garages and all of a sudden they build them up a little bit higher. So whoever doesn't have an improved lot, they're going to catch it first, but it still overflows into these other yards. So it's definitely something that's going to have to be really looked at. And from an engineering standpoint, some of the hands are really tied because where's the water going to go?
I guess, I'd like to, go ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
I was gonna say, isn't that I have to say, I agree. I live on Elmwood and, I'm right where you're talking about. And I've had water up to my deck. I've got, my whole backyard is an impervious surface. So I agree. And that's why I went first to, maybe we should have some neighbors, because I can't imagine if, one of my neighbors.
Well, let's get together, Aaron. we can talk about this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do agree. And I think that there are systems that we can put in place, but they're costly in terms of, French drains. I've thought about doing that in my own backyard. But those are very expensive, remediations, I guess, in terms of, but do you want a pool? Then you have to build a French drain so your neighbor doesn't flood. I mean, I don't know. That's why I kind of was throwing that all out there. And I agree. I feel like I'm the lowest point in the whole neighborhood and I get it all. So I'm with you.
No, you're not. I can show you a house that is lower than yours.
Oh, you don't know where I live.
You said Elmwood, right? First block?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, well, come down Washington and go back 4 houses on the north side.
Yeah, and over by the school, it seems like they remediated a little bit of that, but even by Shalom there, it was awful for a long time. The whole street would flood there. So I'm with you.
Oh no, this is the first block just off Washington.
Okay.
And Main Street, Washington and Main Street.
Hey, Greg,
Okay.
you had your hand raised?
Yeah, from looking at this from let's say a resident perspective, I like the point A that you can't cover your front yard to exceed 50%. I have seen in some cities where people get upset with mowing their grass and they pave their front lawn, either pave it concrete or they pave it green and stick a lawnmower out. So that would prevent people from doing that in the city of Clawson. But if we revolve back a little bit to our landscaping things, some people don't like their front lawns. They'll rip them all out and put plants in. And I've seen on Facebook a lot of people questioning whether that's legal or not to do that. They have no grass on your front lawn and just plants. Is that being covered?
That's fine.
Yep. Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, anybody who wants to can do that.
In fact, the county is trying to promote a program where people are encouraged to plant native plants instead of grass.
Yep.
But one thing you have to be conscientious of is as far as what type of habitat you're creating at that point. Right.
Right.
So,
Some people put gardens on their front lawn with growing tomato plants and cabbages and things. You got to attract wildlife doing that.
Yeah.
So it's a hit and miss. I like
How
the
about
idea of-
AstroTurf?
the idea.
No. So anyway, I think just one other thing I want to mention is that this actually did come out in the Sustainability Committee's first discussion last week. And that was a touch point that the people that are now on the Sustainability Committee were concerned about, wanted to try and raise. And one of the things that, Joe, I think if you may want to encapsulate this better than I, is as far as having a survey put out somehow. And Joe, Joan, I think you may also have that as part of that discussion point, where one of the things that we're looking for is input from the community and those things that are that they're concerned about, and the things that we're raising as part of this this subcommittee. So, but that was definitely one of them, and part of it again is, as we've already touched on, it's those things that are the rain runoff, trying to think, Ed, you had them before. And the heat island was one of the other things as far as that. But those are the things that we'd like to try. Preservation of green space, right? Yeah. So that we have something that we can work towards. And again, it has a lot to do with just where we are in our corner of the world and what type of topography, geology, whatever you want to call it, that is unique to our area, and how we address how we can help manage those spaces with less impact on our neighbors and our other surrounding communities. So, but I think that's fair to say, right? I think that was one of the takeaways that we had at the subcommittee.
Absolutely, yeah, yep. So I guess on that note, I'll give this some consideration. I'll look around. I'll put something together for you, and we'll continue the discussion at a future meeting.
Okay, I appreciate it.
If you need a tour guide, Joe, just give me a call and I'll show you the area.
Okay.
I've seen those pictures of those backyards flooding, and I haven't seen too many this year. But my recommendation is always, if you're not, if you've got grass back there, just plant some bald cypresses. You'll be done with that flooding. But that means everybody.
No,
does.
I had 5 trees back there, and it didn't help.
No, because what'll happen is they'll get root rot, right? Because it's basically sitting in clay in flooded waters, right? So you have to have a certain type. And again, go back to the landscaping ordinance, and you'll find, as far as the type of trees that will be suitable for those types of conditions, right? So
sponges.
Well, yeah, it's a thing, right? So you got something that's, and again, that was part of what that ordinance was, is like addressing soil concerns, right? What it's the right plant in the right location. So, but in any event, okay, all right, moving on. Appreciate the discussion. Move on to agenda item number 9, planners report.
Yes. So one thing I wanted to mention is that we've got a joint meeting coming up. It'll be at your regular meeting time, but it'll be a joint meeting with the City Council and DDA. Topics are still being sorted out. So that's I believe it's the next meeting, in fact. So which is the 25th, May 25th. So there's that. We have a site plan in for a site on North Crooks. It's an expansion of an industrial facility. I'm getting some feedback if someone, folks could mute. So we've got a couple things kind of boiling, and then we'll of course be following up on 655 South Main. So yeah, that's it for me tonight.
Okay. And staff report, training opportunities.
Excuse me, just a quick one, Glenn. Are we going to meet outside so we can have a real good discussion instead of this virtual stuff?
Weather permitting, but then again, we live in Michigan, right? So why do we,
the pavilion in the park.
Yeah, we may keep that for reservation for the sustainability committee, so but I'm not necessarily opposed to that. But as far as whether or not we actually are having an opportunity in the near future, because I think, didn't the governor allow for offices in the next 2 weeks to reconvene or
May 24th.
somehow? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that may, be the linchpin to get us back into closer quarters, shall we say?
Well, we'd be less than 100 people, so we could still meet. That's the current criteria.
Yep. Oh yeah, trust me. Being able to coach a little league game without a mask I'm looking forward to it. So, all right, Joan, I see you have you're unmuted now.
Yes,
Okay.
unmuted.
please.
And just a couple things. C of O was issued for Sozai at 449 West 14. So we'll be seeing a new restaurant there soon. As we mentioned earlier, Luton's Card Shop has opened at 16 South Main. Jason Luton is a Clawson resident, and he has been running that business out of his home for 15 years. So he's pretty well established. So that's nice. We have 2 business changes at the Bywood Square Plaza, and just business owner changes. And we are scheduling inspections for C of O and getting their initial business licenses.
Is that Great Lakes Pot Pies?
No, in the Bywood Square one, the pharmacy and the Palace
yeah.
Liquors at the other end.
Okay.
So, and then we do have the capital improvement plan training tomorrow that Greg and Mike Smith and I are attending through MEDC. So that's about it. And then you've got the training opportunities in your monthly report. So that's it.
Okay, appreciate it. All right, item 11, legal update.
Nothing was provided this time.
Okay. All right, so that leaves us with agenda item 12, adjournment. Any discussion regarding adjournment?
I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn the meeting of May 11th, 2021.
I'll support that.
Got motion support. Any objection, discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Shepherd,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Georges,
Yes.
Mr. Cusero,
Yes.
Mr. McHale,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai,
Yeah.
Mr. Pernick,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
and Mr. Sanaki.
Yes.
All right. All right, I think we're adjourned. Ken, is there anything else we need to do before we sign off?
No, we're all set. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.